Hey guys, it's Mr. Cat's going to go over a quick thing that you should have learned in lesson 5. This is pretty much what we were doing in this lesson. We were taking a quadratic equation and we were solving it many different ways. So I'm just going to go through and don't worry about the names of the strategies. Um, one of the strategies we can use is factoring. So the way that you'd factor this equation is because it's a trinomial and there's a 1 in front, you can automatically factor this into the two things that multiply to negative 15 that add to negative 2. And that's negative 5 and positive 2. So it factors into x plus 2 times x minus 5. Remember, this whole thing equals 0. And if you set each one equal to 0 and solve, add 5 on both sides, you get x equals 5 and x equals negative 2. So that's the factoring method. Quadratic formula method, I'm going to do down here. I'm not going to write the quadratic formula, but remember it's negative b, so it's a negative 2 already. So negative negative 2, positive 2, plus or minus the square root of b squared. Negative 2 squared is a positive 4, minus 4 times a, which is 1, 4 times a times c, which is negative 15, all over 2 times a, which is just 2 times 1, which is 2. Inside, negative 4 times 1 times negative 15 is positive 60. So 4 plus 60 is 64. So inside the square root, you get a positive 64. Square root of 64 is 8. So you get 2 plus or minus 8 divided by 2. So your two answers are 2 plus 8 divided by 2, which is 5. And 2 minus 8, negative 6 divided by 2, which is negative 3. You'll notice we got the same exact answers that we did over here. And I'm sorry. This right here, I'm sorry, I made one mistake over here. The two things that multiply to negative 15 that add to 2 is actually not negative 5 and 2. It's negative 5 and 3. So this becomes a negative 3 because x plus 3 equals 0. So see, you got the same exact answers. The other strategies were actually completing the square. So again, this wouldn't be a strategy you'd necessarily use to do this kind of a problem. But if you had to turn this into vertex form, there's two ways to do it, and I'll show you both ways. First way is to find the vertex by doing negative b over 2a. So negative b is negative negative 2, which is positive 2, over 2 times 1, which is 2. So you get a positive 1. So the x-coordinate of the vertex is 1. And if I plug a 1 back in everywhere, that there's an x, and I could solve for the y. 1 squared minus 2 is negative 1, minus 15 is negative 16. So our vertex is at 1, comma, negative 16. So I can write it in vertex form as y equals x minus 1. Remember, it's the opposite, squared, minus 16. And I know I can see in front of the x squared the dilation is 1, so I don't need to put anything in front of the parentheses. And now I can solve this because this, remember, is equal to 0. So I'm going to move the 16 over. I get 16 equals x minus 1 squared. Now I could square root both sides. Positive and a negative 4, because that's the square root of 16, equals x minus 1. And if I add 1 to both sides, I get x equals a positive 4 plus 1, which is 5, and a negative 4 plus 1, which is negative 3. Same answers I got here and here. The other strategies are to remember to graph it. So if I go into my calculator and I hit graph, and I use my stat calc to find the zeros right here and right here, those are my answers. I'll get negative 3 and 5. And the other way is you can use your table. And when you use your table, remember you're looking for when y is 0. So here, right here, where y is 0, I get an answer of 5. And if I go backwards, you'll see that on my table I'll get a answer of 0 and with the negative 3. And those are the ways that you solve quadratic, all the different ways. And I didn't show you putting it in vertex form. Instead of finding the vertex using the formula, I could actually complete the square, which means I'm looking to make this a perfect square. So to do so, I need to change my last number. And I can do that by thinking about, remember that a perfect square, if you square root of a times 2 times the square root of c will always get you this middle term. And so I know that the number here is a 1. So the square root of 1 is 1. 1 times 2 times what will get me a 2? And this number would have to be a 1. So in order to make the negative 15 a 1, I'm going to add 16 to this quadratic equation. And that actually gets me a perfect square trinomial. If I were to factor this, you would end up with x minus 1 times x minus 1, or in other words, x minus 1 squared. And then because I added 16 in the beginning, I'd have to subtract 16 in order to keep the equation the same. And you'll notice that this is the same thing that we got over here. Just another way to find out vertex form of an equation. But again, in this particular problem, I would have used factoring or I would have used the quadratic formula more than likely to solve this.